CDBG consultant. And thank you, Eric. And so he's been helping us guide us through our CDBG programming. So he's been really, really helpful to us. And so we're here today because all of you are recipients, sub-recipients of CDBG funding for program year 4721. And so I wanted all of us to just get together and just go through some basics of what it means to be a CDBG recipient, what the reporting and reimbursement requirements look like, just so that we are all on the same page at the start of the program year, even though we're starting a little bit late this year again, just to make things easier for you. Because really, you know, my job is to help you have the services you need to do your very important work in the community. And so I want to try to make that as easy as possible for everyone so that you all can continue to do your important work for the city. So we'll talk a bit more just about CDBG in general, about, like I said, the reimbursement and reporting requirements, and then we will have time at the end for Q&A. The webinar is being recorded, so it will be available for folks afterwards if you have to go back and ask questions, or if you need to share it with a colleague or something like that. Okay, and actually before I hand it over to Eric for him to get started, I wanted to just put one last plug-in for folks to remind you all that there is still funding available in the CDBG CV round, and that's funding up to $10,000 to help your organization respond, prepare for, or prevent the coronavirus. So if you have not yet submitted an application for that, I encourage you to do so, or to give me a call to learn more about what that would look like. And for those of you that have submitted, you will be hearing from us soon. Okay, all right, thanks everyone. And I will hand it over to Eric.
Thank you, Lucy, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good to be back with you. I've seen some familiar faces from previous sessions similar to this. So I think most everybody on the call, as Lucy said, has been invited because your organization is scheduled to be a CDBG subrecipient for the city of Meriden for this program year. I think most of the organizations involved have received CDBG funding in the past. So this is not brand new to you. But that brings me to my first and perhaps one of our most important points. One of the things that needed to be clarified, and HUD has commented on for Meriden's CDBG public service program, is the CDBG regs actually require for a public service to be eligible, it must meet multiple requirements, but generally to be eligible, it must be either a new service or an expanding service within the city of Meriden. So seeing as that most of the organizations are involved and on this call have received funding in the past, you're unlikely to be a new program. So what we will need that you'll have to document throughout this program year, and you should see that in your subrecipient agreement, and it was also in the application for funding, you'll need to document how your program has expanded from the 2020 program year to the 2021 program year. There's multiple ways you can do that. The simplest way is to serve more people this year than you did last year. HUD refers to that as a quantifiable increase. It does not define what the minimum quantifiable increase is. So I'll let you read between the lines there. But for those of you that did have funding last year, look at your annual summary of your beneficiaries that were reported for this program. And you got to do just a tad bit better than that this year. That's the simplest way to document a quantifiable increase. So in a moment, we're going to be sharing with you a revised beneficiary report that will be submitted quarterly. So Lucy will work with you to track your progress quarterly moving forward against where you were similar time in the prior years. So for example, simple math says if you served 100 people last year, roughly 25 a quarter, that we'd be tracking to try to benchmark slightly better than 25 a quarter when you submit your...
¿Te falta poco para llegar a casa?
So quantifiable increase in the number of participants or beneficiaries from your program is the simplest way. Other ways to quantifiably document an increase, for example, if you're offering some sort of class or training session or mentoring programs, etc. And let's just say, for a simple example, you offered those on Monday nights, or you offered them 2 Saturdays a month. Or maybe you only offer them in one specific location in the city of Meriden. If you offer them more times a week, more times a month at multiple locations, that can also document an expansion or a quantifiable expansion. So don't think of this as I got to go hire a whole bunch of new case managers or program managers, etc. It might be that you've just make some slight modifications to your offerings and that sort of stuff. And again, that is what documents that all of this is eligible. So this is like threshold eligibility. So we're going to talk about eligible expenses, and you've got those, you're familiar with those, and you've line itemed your budget in your application, which is an attachment to your subrecipient agreement. So we're all familiar with what eligible expenses are, but for the whole program to be eligible, we've got to be able to document that quantifiable increase. Again, because I'm assuming most of you are not doing a new program. For a few of you that might be doing a new program within your organization, let's say you were doing something for youth last year. Again, I'm just using simple examples. And then this year you added a senior program. Well, that's a new program. And then that would be eligible on its own right. As a new program being facilitated by your organization. So I know we're going to do a little Q&A at the end, so I'll move on from there. But just in summary, quantifiable increase in the number of people or participants, or documentation that you have expanded your service offerings. And that could be in the number of opportunities to access your program, the locations available to access your programs. And so we can be pretty broad here. If you have questions about, is this meet that definition? Certainly Lucy and I can work with you to do so. So as I mentioned, we have we're trying to simplify the process for reporting and make it a little bit more direct for what the city ultimately has to report to HUD. And so if you'll give me one moment, I'm going to share my screen here. I know that winds up messing up your screen, so I'll let everybody take a second there to sort of get their screen resituated if you might need to. But I'm sharing with you a Word document. Let me see if I can blow this up a little bit bigger here. And for those of you that may be on your phones, I know it looked like maybe a couple people were out and in your cars or something like that. We'll definitely get this emailed to you quickly. And if you have follow-up questions, certainly, again, Lucy and I can walk through. So it's a fairly quick 4-page Word document. We've simplified it. You're going to be doing this quarterly. So you may still, and I don't want to get ahead of the agenda here, but you may still be invoicing monthly, but you'll submit quarterly beneficiaries. So this form is just strictly based or to report the beneficiaries of your program. So pretty straightforward stuff here at the top, your organization name and project, the quarter reporting. We've got here highlighted in this table when the quarterly reports are due, or when the quarters are, and then they will be due within the following month. So 30 days following the end of the quarter, your quarterly beneficiary report is due. Then you're going to provide some details here. This is for Lucy and the city's sake to report back to HUD. This is exactly the answers or the data points that we have to provide on each of these programs. So this will be very helpful. So question number 1, for each of the first 3 quarters, you'll submit the quarterly information. So just for that quarter. And then you see at the top, for quarter 4, at the end of June, when the program year ends, you will submit one final annual report. So you'll have 3 individual quarters, and then the 4th report will be an annualized report, effectively summarizing all beneficiaries for the program year. So in each of the quarterlies, you'll put the information here for that quarter. And then the 4th one, you'll summarize all 4 quarters. And by simple math, Lucy and I will be able to figure out what you did in the 4th quarter by simple deduction of what you did in the first 3. So the total number of people in question 1. Question 2, I asked you to identify the beneficiaries by income. Several of you work with special needs populations, and we get to presume their income. Lucy and I'll work with you directly on how to answer this question. For some of you, you're not required to ask income information because of those special needs populations. And we'll make sure you utilize the presumption figure that HUD allows us to do. So I think most of you are probably familiar with these, the median income limits, 30%, 50%, and 80%. And then anybody that's above 80%. As a point of clarification, you might remember when we did an application workshop, we discussed this. Your programs do not have to 100% serve low to moderate income households. That's never been a real requirement. That's been a misinterpretation of the rules. At the end of the year, the majority, which means 51% of all the people that participated in your program for that year, must be low to moderate income residents of Meriden. Okay, so I'll say that again. You can serve people in your programs, your public service programs, that are above 80% AMI and use CDBG money to fund that. But at the end of the year, when you submit your annual, the total number of low mod income CDBG assisted has to be at least 51% of the total population assisted. Okay. For question 3, the race and ethnicity. So the total number for number 3 needs to match the total number for number 2. So if it's 100 clients that you reported on income, I need 100 clients that you reported on race and ethnicity. Okay, from HUD's perspective, Hispanic is an ethnicity, and it's the only one that they actually ask us to report on. So you've got race on the left-hand side, and then yes or no whether they're Hispanic, and then the total for white. So you could have 10 white non-Hispanic, 5 white Hispanic, the total would be 15. Okay, pretty straightforward there. Again, you're gonna, in the first 3 reports, you'll report on only the beneficiaries for that individual quarter. The 4th report will be annualized, all 4 quarters aggregated. Then the following questions, 4, 5, and 6 are perhaps subsets of those beneficiaries previously entered in 1, 2, and 3. So in number 4, you're talking about some very different special needs populations. Some of these may not apply to you at all, and so there would just be simply a 0. Others of you might be entirely serving these populations. Again, these are just additional data points that HUD asked us to report on. So we're asking for your help on these reports. Question 5 typically is a point of what gets folks tripped up a little bit. What we want to know is, in that quarter, how many of the 50 people that you served are brand new, meaning they came to your organization for the first time of service that quarter, brand new. That does not to say that somebody that comes in first quarter can't continue to receive assistance or participate in your programming, but we'd like to know how many brand new people came in that quarter, and that's what we would do here. Then the performance indicator, number 6, new or improved. Again, that's that HUD definition, new or expanded or improved. And so for most of us, you're going to have improved access or expanded access. You may be documenting new people. And if you've got new people that have never received assistance, then that's pretty straightforward. There's only one or two of you that have anything to do with homeless shelters. So most of you in these last couple of questions that bleed over to the next page will probably be leaving those blank. And then in number 7, most of you indicated in your application that you had other sources of funds that were contributing to managing and operating the program that's being assisted with CDBG funds. And so we're asking you to report that here in your these quarterly beneficiary reports, the amount of other funds that have been utilized for this program as well. Again, this helps us report closeout for the end of the year. Then you'll sign and date at the bottom. And then just again here, this last page is some summary information about some of these definitions and then the current income limits. And you can see our program 80% AMI. So again, the majority, 51% of your beneficiaries at the end of the year have to be at or below 80% AMI adjusted for household size. Okay. So I can stop there if you don't mind, if that's okay, Lucy, and see if there's any questions on what we've gone over so far. You can either, come off mute and just give me a wave so I can find you. I'm going to stop my share so I can kind of see faces a little better. Kat, you have a question?
I do.
Hi there.
So when we write down the number of people served, like I do the after school arts program. So we're serving the kids, but I feel like we also serve like the teachers and the teaching assistants because we give them stipends. So would that be included in the number?
Yeah, absolutely. They're all benefiting from your program. That's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Beth?
Yes, hi.
Hi there.
We provide a litter patrol service to the city of Meriden. So it's a recurring service. We use a group of disabled individuals to do that. So we don't often have a lot of new people because we're working to train that group to do that work. Is there a threshold or a minimum number of new people to be served? Or if we showed one new person, would that qualify?
One is quantifiable. I don't mean to be
okay.
cute with that answer, but one is quantifiable.
Okay.
So yes, that would be sufficient and understood. And so I think that's something that, Lucy, you may want to, and Joe might want to speak with Beth offline to make sure we're meeting goals, if you will, for that program.
Okay.
And Beth, one of the things too, you don't always go in the same area as you're doing this. So you do move around the city and do different things in different sections. So, I mean, that's one of the other positives as well that would be put in this report. But okay. Lucy and I will definitely talk with you a little bit further. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, Kat.
Whoops. I think that I'm right on this, but I just want to double check. Because of COVID, we did online only last year, and this year we're coming back in person. So I'm going to assume that's part of the. Okay.
Again, I'm not trying to be cute. I'm on your side. I'm with the city. We want to make sure that we document and quantify to HUD satisfaction. And I think I'm in line here, Joe and Lucy, but we want to meet the requirement and we don't need to go overboard. So yes, if you explain that last year it was only off-site, remote, limited capacity, and this year we're back to full tilt in the building, we've got more capacity, then that is absolutely a quantifiable increase in your available services. Now, next year, now we might have a little more difficult time. And so folks need to, maybe project for that, but we'll discuss that at a later point.
So I think now is a good time, Eric and Lucy, I'm going to jump in for a second. And those of you, I know most of you, but just in case, I am Joe Fest, the Economic Development Director and Community Service for the City of Meriden. We are here to help you service the people within the city. We want to work with you on everything that you do and what we are funding. So as we go along with this, and we have been fortunate enough to bring Civitas in to help us modernize what we're doing. I have sat in this seat for 2 years. Lucy has been in for a couple months. In that time frame, we have worked with Eric to basically revitalize, rejuvenate, and restructure Cdbg as you all have known it for all this time. And what we are doing is we're bringing it into what we should be doing and how it's best to service the residents of the city of Meriden. All the changes we are making are part of what HUD is always required from us. Nothing that you see here is, well, some stuff is new in the fact that you haven't had to report it possibly, but these are all things that should have been being done, or the method has changed as from reporting from years past. The forms have been updated. I know that you all have been very, very patient with us in the fact that for the last 2 years, you have not gotten your Cdbg money on an untimely fashion. And no fault to Lucy, myself, or Eric's hard work in trying to get this done. Last year was COVID, it pushed back. I want to say we were back until November and December. Kind of this year, similar situation, we were pushed back about 2.5 to 3 months. Again, we were ready. You all participated in our forums back in January and March, and then when we finished up everything in April. So, you know, we've all gone through some transitions. I positively hate blaming things on COVID, but COVID has a drastic effect on a lot of the stuff that we're doing here today. There was a time, and I truthfully want to get back to this. And one of the goals that I have when we hired Lucy was the personal touch. I'm an old school business person. When you're servicing people, you want to be in front of them. And thankfully, Lucy is on board with this and wants to meet and work with you and do these things and go over your programs and get to know everything on a personal level. And as we do this, this is what's going to help you fill out these forms. And I will tell you, you know, just so you know, you fill out the forms, there is a tremendous amount of behind the scene work that goes into what you give us. So when we ask for things on a timely fashion, it's because I have a deadline that we have to get things into HUD on. And if we don't have the information, it makes it very difficult. As you can tell, I've already pulled out a lot of my hair as we've been trying to go through this stuff. I mean, it is what it is. But we want to work in tandem with you, and never do we want, and I know I can speak for Lucy and Eric being our consultant on this, never do we want to work against you. We want to work with you. We want to get these things done and help you and guide you through the process. And that's what today is all about. So I'll let Eric jump back in, but you know, this is important. If you have questions, definitely ask us. Do Lucy and I have the answers all the time right off the top? No, but we will get them for you. We haven't stumped Eric yet, but I'm sure we'll come up with something that we probably will stump him, but he'll find it out for us too. So, I mean, if you don't think something is qualified, talk with us and we'll figure out if it is. And we'd rather know now than at the end of this program. And then we're scrambling, trying to get you covered for what we've agreed to. So please ask away. And as we go through the forms, they are different as mentioned, but they're different to help us get the information we need so this runs smoothly for everyone.
Thank you, Joe. So next we're going to talk about the process for requesting reimbursement for your expenses. I'm going to give you some high points of what Cdbg requires, and so you can know what your package expectations are, if you will, and then I'll turn it over to Lucy to give you the particulars about how you will physically submit those packages requesting for reimbursement. So in your applications, all of you provided a budget and line item budget for what you intended to use the funds for. Most of you were asking for staff salaries, or facility rent and utilities. Those are pretty straightforward, definitely eligible. For those of you that are doing staff salaries, which is most of you, you must have timesheets that documented that that staff person worked on this program. It doesn't have to be a complicated timesheet. We can get you plenty of samples if you'd like one, but you have to have a timesheet that said, Joe worked on the CDBG funded program, this amount of hours the last 2 weeks, the last payroll period, and then a copy of the payroll. So most of you had been submitting proof of payroll for that individual that showed he or she worked 40 hours in the last week. But we need you to document that that work was particularly for this CDBG funded activity. Okay, so a slight nuance there. From there, we also need proof that you've actually paid the payroll. Remember, it's a reimbursement. So if you're using a payroll system with the ACH, like ADP or something like that, and you're doing every 2 weeks or every month payroll, then that's fine. So an invoice package for salaries in that situation would have a cover page of all the people that are being requested and the amounts, proof of the ACH. I assume most of you use ACH, but if you're using a check, then a copy of the check. For those of you that are doing other expenses like rent, utilities, perhaps some of you are using the funds for supplies, a copy of a canceled check, a receipt, something like that is necessary to prove or document the payment. So again, it's a reimbursement program, so we need you to not only document the expense was incurred and eligible per our agreement, but also that the expense was in fact paid prior to submitting for reimbursement. So that seems pretty straightforward, but I think in past, folks were just submitting, for example, a copy of payroll, and that's not quite sufficient. And also, if you're using a paper check, I saw this a couple times, we need the check image after it's cleared your bank. And again, that's not don't get me wrong, that's not a distrust between Meriden, myself, and you. That's what HUD wants to see, that the check has actually, the expense has been incurred and paid for. So a few of you would run a copy of a check before you mailed it out or before you handed it to staff or a vendor or whatever. Preferably, you would get that from your bank statement once it's cleared your bank account. Okay. So just again, real quick, if you're doing payroll, we need timesheets to document the time spent on the CDBG activity, then proof of payroll, and depending on what type of payroll system you use, you may need some sort of additional documentation to show that the payroll, the check, the payment, the ACH, whatever, was actually dispersed. Utilities, rent, or other supplies, copies of canceled checks, receipts. If you go to Home Depot or something like that, or Lowe's or whatever, the hardware store to get the supplies, or some of you are doing food pantries. And so I know maybe you're buying groceries from the grocery store, et cetera. So just copies of receipts for those things is also documentation clearly that they've been paid, and that would be acceptable. So with that, I'll turn it back to Lucy to go over the mechanics of how you'll actually submit your application. And then Gretchen can come back to questions.
I do have a question. I understand the part about the timesheets, but what I'm not understanding is when it comes to the payroll and say the social worker gets paid not just for the visits for CDBG, which she's going to get one payroll. She's going to get one check, and included in that is going to be part of her salary. So how do we that's precisely why we need the CDBG specific timesheet. Well, that I understand. So then you will see her,
So what we'll be able to do is with your payroll, we'll see the hourly rate equivalent for that staff person. Give me one second. So let's just simple math, that person gets $20 an hour. but he or she worked 80 hours total, but only 10 of those were for CDBG. So I've got to be able to document somewhere. And in the past, what we have seen in invoice packages is there's a cover sheet that says, this is what I'd like to be reimbursed, but then the supporting documentation is not laid out step by step to clearly document what is attributable to CDBG. So the payroll says that individual definitely got paid, and we can come up with the hourly rate equivalent. Then the timesheet for CDBG helps you effectively create an invoice to the CDBG program. Okay, 20 hours of $20 an hour, 10 hours on this CDBG timesheet for the month, 10 times 20, easy enough, that's $200. Now my cover sheet for reimbursement to CDBG is $200 for that person, even though he or she might have gotten paid thousands of dollars if only a portion of her work or his or her work is CDBG. And that's precisely why we're asking for this additional details, because while we all could understand and figure out, we were definitely getting copies of payroll that far exceeded the CDBG eligible work, but we weren't actually documenting the CDBG work was completed. And so that's why we need that middle step.
Okay, thanks.
Hello.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm Kish Solanki. Of course, I'm filling in for Jim Matthews from Child Guidance. The days of receiving the checks or canceled checks from the bank are pretty well, I think, over at this time. Basically, when you pay electronically, the money goes from the payroll to the person, and there are no canceled checks. Unless, like your bank is just doing and charging you extra. And nowadays, the bank do charge. So how do you expect to cancel checks? So I'm saying is we have sent our own register from the, that is given by our payroll processing company, circling the individual's name.
And that's totally acceptable. Not everyone does a payroll software system. Not everyone does ACH. And so depending on what you are using, there will be slight modifications. But I looked at invoice packages from some of you for the last year, and I saw handwritten old school checks that were written once or twice a month to staff or vendors or contractors or whoever it might have been that were being paid. If that's your process, then we need a copy of the canceled check. And that should be pretty easy. Your monthly bank statement would show an image of the check, or at least detailed that check number 100 cleared in this amount. And so it's only if you're using paper checks do I need a copy of the paper check. But showing us payroll that is going to transact on October 31st is not proof that anybody got paid. It's proof that you set up payroll in advance, right? So we need proof that the payroll was in fact paid, whatever your system is. Okay. I'm going to scan one more. There was one more question.
Like Lou has a question.
Lou, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, hi, Lou Pernell from Literacy Volunteers of Greater New Haven. In your packet, you have a time distribution record. That I've been completing that year after year, and I've never submitted anything else but that. Are you saying you need more than that? This shows, the employee's name, the activities, CDBG hours, non-CDBG hours, their wages, and then the total, and then it's signed by the employee. Do you also, what else do you need with this?
So you are going to submit that. The time distribution record is basically what Eric was talking about a few minutes ago. We want some record of like how many hours, Johnny Appleseed worked at the literacy program, and, so that we know how many hours we can charge a CDBG of their payroll. In addition to that, we need the actual proof that that person was paid, which is the summary sheet from ADP payroll, if that's what you use, or the canceled check, or whatever method that you can use to show us that the payroll has in fact been processed.
Okay. So you do. So
you were doing half of it, and that's really what was happening across the board. Like some people were doing this part, some people were doing that part. if you're getting reimbursed from payroll, you need to show us who worked and for how long and in what element of the program, and that they were in fact already paid by you so we can reimburse you.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions? Oh, Pat.
Okay, just to be clear then, so as long as we're using a payroll service, all you need is the register. You don't need proof that we paid the payroll service because they don't give you a paycheck unless you pay them, correct?
Yeah,
that's right. But,
okay.
but to my point, I'm not a payroll software expert, so I can't speak to what everybody is using. But often you set up payroll in the middle of the month for it to run at the end of the month. We need the export from your payroll system after it has been run.
Right.
You can't submit an invoice on the 15th and show a payroll that's not going to yet occur till the 31st.
Yeah, now the ADP registers will show the pay date and all of that on it. So
and
okay,
that's
as
what
long as I don't have to be submitting bills that were paid for ADP in addition to the register.
no.
Exactly.
Okay,
correct.
thanks.
And one more thing to add to that. So in addition, we're also supposed to submit, what is it? I just wrote it down. The timesheet that like the person, the social worker that's going out, is that also in addition, or is that in one of the forms through the Cdbg? Or do we have to submit literally their timesheet?
That's the one that Lou just asked about. So
okay,
the
so
time
that
distribution.
one stays the same. Great. It's getting less complicated. Thank you.
If you can make me the host, I'll share my screen and I can show everyone those documents. Okay. Okay, can everyone see my screen? So this is the time distribution record form that Lou asked about. This was in your agreement packet that came. So really this is what you would submit when you are asking for reimbursement for payroll expenses. Okay, so this is one part of it. So going back to what Eric said when we first started at this session, Cdbg is a reimbursement program. So you have to spend the money and then you ask us for reimbursement. And then we also have to do the same thing to HUD. Then we have to show HUD that we paid you and then we get reimbursed. So it's all part of the process. So whenever anyone wants to get reimbursed for any expenses, whether it's payroll, program supplies, rent, help, anything like that, you're going to submit this form. This is a certification statement. This just says, hey, I'm in charge of the Cdbg programming at my agency. We're requesting this much money at this time, and I'm certifying that everything in here is accurate to the best of my ability. That's the first part. The second part that you're going to submit is your invoice. So this was also included in the packet. And so this is the invoice. This information here is just it's a fillable form. Tell me what quarter you're seeking reimbursement for. And then you're just going to add in your expenses right here, your BJ's food expenses for the home health care or after school program supplies that you purchased at Amazon. All of that will be added here and the total. That's the invoice. If you were, like we just said, if you're being reimbursed for salary, you're also going to submit this one. If you're just getting reimbursed for program supplies or rent and utilities or anything like that, you don't need this one. This is just if you're getting reimbursed for salary. Yeah, and those are all of the important forms that are relative to reimbursement. Are there any questions about those? recap, please.
So I think I already screwed up. I started sending stuff in before this meeting because I was basing it on how it happened last year and how slow the process was. So I was trying to get ahead of the game. So should I just have you throw everything out and I'll start over?
That would be great. Yeah, and I saw your email and I didn't respond because I knew we were meeting today and I knew you were gonna put it all together. So don't sweat it. And that's okay, again, because, you know, like Eric said earlier, we're making a lot of adjustments to the program and a lot of it looks different. So it's gonna be a learning curve for everyone. But we're here to help. So if you have any questions or concerns about it, let us know.
And Lucy, we can submit this via email, not mail, direct mail. Submit all the
reimbursements? Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The whole packet could be emailed to you, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other
questions? The only
questions?
part that we've kind of asked you to send in to us is always, you know, usually the contract or the initial applications, because it's 5 copies and so on. So, I mean, that's the part that we really, there's 2 reasons why we asked you to come in. One is because there's going to be so much documentation that it is easier on our side for you to bring it in. The second is it's just contact with you and to go over things and to see. So Kat, as you mentioned, you know, you sent in to get things in advance and get working. Well, we've kind of set up a better system this time. So we won't have as much of a delay as we had before, as long as we get the information that's needed in the packet. So things we're asking for what we need, but we're also making it technically easier for you in the long run, and easier for us to help service you. So that's the goal of this part.
Great. I don't see any questions in the chat box. Are there any other questions that folks have they want to touch base about before? Keith?
Yes, are you jumping ahead or are we only entertaining questions right now about reimbursement?
Well, I think we're sort of at the end of our program, so you're welcome.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, I thank you. I just have a question about the project request form and the approval matrix and additional information. At one point, it talks about the proposals will be reviewed by the Meriden Steering Committee, blah, blah, blah. And number 4, the pages aren't numbered, but I think this is page, I'm not sure, says the steering committee will provide a priority rating. The priority rating is based upon City of Meriden priorities. I didn't see what those City of Meriden priorities are. But it's part of the scoring process.
What document were you reading from, Keith?
I'm looking at these, not the project the project request form, and it's relative to the project approval matrix. If I'm coming in out of left field here, I can just hit you up with this offline.
Yeah, let's have an offline conversation because I'm curious to learn more about that. So if it's okay with you, Keith, we'll have an offline conversation about that.
No problem.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I have a question. Hello?
Go ahead, Melissa, sorry. Yep.
We have a couple of CDBG programs that we work with, one of which is the shelter in Meriden. And I don't believe it's going to be difficult for us to prove expanded services this year. But my question to you is, historically, I've been sending this report in for the shelter on a quarterly basis. Is that necessary? Or if I can document that we've used these CDBG funds within a quarter, is that acceptable?
Yeah, it's the contracts you guys all sign are for a period of performance for 1 year. So we do need it for the full year. That being said, some of you might want to review that with Lucy and Joe and change your period of performance. Because I know that there's some programs out there that are like a summer camp program or a 1 or 2 event type program, in which case you would not want to be beholden to monthly reports. So I encourage you to take a look at your subrecipient agreements and the period of performance, and perhaps modify those if necessary. That would alleviate unnecessary reporting when the funds have been expired.
It would be easier for us just to report once, but I don't want to do anything that's going to throw us out on the expanded services line.
So Melissa, I'm going to answer this in a little bit two ways. What you're doing, I understand you're trying to make it easier on your side, but for us at the same time, these are things that we have to report and do. And
I know.
Keep us updated of what you're spending. It helps us at the end of the day. Because if you're delayed in getting in your report and it's close to the end of the time frame, and I know what type of funding you get and I know what you use it for, but I mean, because you do use it, Eric's point is if you're running the farmer's market's only in the summertime. Mm-hmm. They're not in the wintertime. There's nothing that they're doing, but you actually have expenses throughout the 12 months. So for us, it is a helpful thing to report it in a timely fashion of how you're spending it.
Okay.
Also keep in mind for programs that run for a year and other funding sources are leveraged in, then we've said that the program is supplemented by CDBG, but the program itself is what's being reported on, right? Most programs around the country, the CDBG funds aren't 100% of the funds. So just because the CDBG funds have been expired in 2 months or 3 or 6, the program that is CDBG funded is still ongoing. And so we report to HUD the program, which is part of why we're asking to document those additional funds that have been leveraged in for this program or for the specific program.
The other point is too, is that if you wait until the end of the year and say some part of, and I'm not at all saying you do this, but say some part of the reporting is missing, it makes it harder to catch back up when we're waiting until the last month to get all this in. But say the demographics or say who served or what, it's fresher during the quarters to know the numbers and how they come in than if you wait until the end. So, and as Eric says, that is part of our contract of how we're asking you to report to us.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Lucy, you're on mute.
Thank you. I was just checking to see if there are any other questions, and there do not appear to be, and there's none in the chat. And we did cover everything we anticipated to. So we'll wrap it up and give you back the last 10 minutes of the hour. If you have any questions, any concerns, if you want to talk anything through with me, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and or Joe. We're here to help. And thank you for everything that you do for the city.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, take care.
Bye.